Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Network. We're outside here in a very nice, cool breeze outside the Trump Soho. Trump just wrapped up his speech. I'll have a video on that with what he said. It definitely did not sound like the Donald Trump we've heard over the last 9 months. A lot more polished, a lot more scripted, frankly, a lot more presidential. I mean, I kind of look at it, if you have a conscience, you won't vote for him, but if you haven't heard all the things he said up to date and you just heard him for the first time today, it was kind of an appealing candidate. As a political matter, he's appealing. I'm here with Emma Vigeland, our wonderful intern. You were here with me, Facebook Living, all that stuff. I kind of like the first thing out of my brain was within 2 minutes, he mentioned jobs 4 times and directly went after Bernie Sanders supporters.
That's why we're asking Bernie Sanders voters to join our movement, so together we can fix the system for all Americans so important.
His tone was a little softer, more kind of like polished and trying to be serious. And he also, I don't think till maybe 3/4 through, mentioned immigration. He didn't mention Muslims. He didn't mention Mexicans by name. I kind of thought whether you like him or not is irrelevant. As a political matter, it was a good speech.
Yeah, I mean, after the first 10 minutes or so, I was like, holy shit, this is a good speech. He appealed directly to Bernie Sanders supporters, and he had a very populist tone. He talked about overthrowing a corrupt system, which is something that a lot of independents care about. I mean, I think the Democratic establishment forgot that independents vote in the general election too, and Hillary Clinton does horrible with independents. So I kind of had this sinking feeling when I was watching the speech at first, thinking, oh my God, this could work. And when we talked earlier today about half of Bernie Sanders supporters say that they refuse to vote for Hillary Clinton, Trump could win over a bunch of them, and I think that's a really real possibility if he keeps on this tone.
We are going to make America rich again. We are going to make America safe again. We are going to make America great again, and great again for everyone. Everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the poll you're talking about is a Bloomberg poll. It says only 55% of Bernie supporters are going to vote for her, so that's almost half won't vote for her. That's pretty much what I thought, because there was a poll 3-4 weeks ago saying 72% of Bernie supporters will vote for her. And I was like, that doesn't match what I'm seeing all around over the country. I've talked to, at this point, between 1,000, 2,000 supporters. I'd say maybe, by my mind, 15 to 20% will vote for her. So you have that poll. You have Ohio, they're tied right now in a Quinnipiac poll. Pennsylvania, she's up by 1. So that's a statistical tie. Florida, she's up significantly. But I thought what was really interesting about this speech was this came 2 days after he fired his campaign manager. A lot of people felt and reported that basically the campaign manager was just letting Donald be Donald, playing into propping up his worst instincts, which we saw was to go after Muslims and Mexicans and all this stuff. Reports now say that his children are taking the reins, which essentially means Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump is very popular. I could just anecdotally, my mother's like, oh, if only Donald acted more like Ivanka. This speech was polished. It was scripted. He was reading from a script, and it was laser focused on jobs. Put aside all the stuff he said about Hillary, it was all about jobs. He talked about infrastructure, crumbling roads, all that stuff, right at the top.
When I see the crumbling roads and bridges, or the dilapidated airports, or the factories moving overseas to Mexico, or to other countries for that matter, I know these problems can all be fixed, but not by Hillary Clinton, only by me.
To me, if you're a low information voter, if you haven't been paying attention to the brewing fascism he has evoked, and you're kind of tuning in closer to the general election, and you see a guy talking about how he's going to bring you back jobs. He's a successful businessman. He is basically pointing out that Hillary Clinton, she's more of the same. I mean, if people don't remember, the last jobs report was 38,000 jobs. I mean, they could talk about 5% unemployment all they want, but most people don't feel a recovery. I think this speech, if he talks like this and avoids talking about Muslims and Mexicans and whatever other group he wants to hate tomorrow, I think he's going to close the polls.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what's so interesting to me is how little he cares about the Republican Party platform. I mean, he talked about getting rid of NAFTA, and he talked about how we have to defeat the TPP, which is stuff that Bernie Sanders was saying. And infrastructure, Republicans don't want to invest in infrastructure. They want to give tax breaks to billionaires and give corporate welfare out. I mean, he's just saying what's popular. He puts his finger to the wind. He feels the pulse of the country, and he sees that there's a massive electorate of Bernie Sanders supporters who don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. He's capitalizing on it. I mean, who knows how much Ivanka is having a say in his campaign, but it's very notable, like you said, that Lewandowski's departure had an effect, I guess, on his rhetoric, because he looks a lot more like a viable general election candidate, and that's scary. I mean, the first half or two-thirds of his speech was very much populist, very anti-establishment, all the stuff that Bernie Sanders supporters like to see. He did kind of slip back into that xenophobic stuff towards the end, talking, not saying Mexicans by name, but talking about the border, talking about security. But on the whole, I think we may have witnessed something very important, kind of a historic moment in Donald Trump's campaign.
ISIS also threatens peaceful Muslims across the Middle East and peaceful Muslims across the world who have been terribly victimized by horrible brutality and who only want to raise their kids in peace and safety.
And I think we should put a disclaimer, because we're already seeing the tweets and the Facebook comments and yada yada. This isn't me or Emma. She'll speak for herself. I'm not endorsing Donald Trump. You'd sooner see me fucking go to Syria and join the army than ever vote for Donald Trump. That's not happening. I don't support Donald Trump. I don't care what he says. He's disqualified to me personally. But if you're just covering politics as politics and how a speech was, how effective it could be, you have to be honest. And his speech went much further and, more importantly, much more effective than any speech Bernie Sanders has given on Hillary Clinton. Remember, during the Brooklyn debate that I was at, Bernie Sanders was asked straight up, can you name one example of Hillary Clinton receiving donations and then in return voting for something or not voting for something? He pivoted back to his General Wall Street speech. Donald Trump went example by example of basically her Wall Street donors filling her coffers and her then scratching their back, whether it's Wall Street or other special interests. That is appealing to independents. That is appealing to what they call the Reagan Democrats, who are more conservative Democrats. Frankly, hate to say it, it's going to be appealing to some Bernie supporters who are the most ardent never Hillary people. Whether they will vote for her or not, I don't know. But watching this speech, again, if you're just tuning in now and you haven't been paying attention to, Hitler 2.0 for the last 6 months, this is a populist tone and it's effective. I think the other thing that I found really interesting was he talked, if you just notice like very little things, he talked much softer. Like, yeah, there were little parts of bombast and like flat, like you could tell he was going off script, but I'd say 80% of it was he sounded just like a politician to me, rather than like, oh, lying Ted and crooked Hillary and, playing to the fans. And I think you're going to see that more because as the media, you're going to hear the word pivot. Don't have a drinking party to the word pivot today, because you're going to hear pivot nonstop. Yeah, you'll die. But the bottom line is he's talking like a politician. So if you're like my mother, who texted me saying, what'd you think of the speech? It sounded very classy. My mother, I love her. She's very well-meaning, way more Republican than I. But she is an example of people who just on the eye test feel like something like that looks like something they could get behind.
Well, like you said, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm not advocating for anyone to vote for Donald Trump, but we have a responsibility as a journalist, me as a journalist intern, to report what we saw and the political reality of the situation.
As a journalist, not an intern.
Okay. We have to report that it looked good. It looked good. It looked populist. We know that the country hates the establishment right now, and he's able to harness that energy, and he's doing it effectively in the wake of this major shakeup in his campaign.
We are going to make America great again, and great again for everyone. Thank you very much.
Another thing I noticed, if you look at phrases, he used the term inner cities at least 5 or 6 times. It's a direct play to the African American vote, which, if you remember, he's pointed out the last rally, oh, my African American over there. He's called them the blacks. I mean, this is not a man who's very endearing to struggling minorities. And he's mentioned inner cities. He also talked about specifically how Hillary's policies and Bill Clinton's policies have hurt the inner cities. Whether it will work, I don't know, but you're not going to get that vote if you don't start talking to them.
Inner cities, which have been horribly abused by Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party, will finally be rebuilt.
I also think that he didn't by name mention Latinos in a negative or positive way, but he was also trying to appeal to struggling people in minority communities. I mean, that's an appealing message. And Hillary Clinton, of course, she had done a lot better among African Americans and Latinos than Bernie Sanders in the primary. But this is now a general election. A lot of them do, like everybody else, they do vote on jobs. And they might look at a businessman. I've met African Americans on the campaign trail that say, yeah, man, he could get me a job because look at his business. Like, that is a predominant thought among some people. So I think the fact that he's now using it in his speeches is a positive step for him.
When he was appealing to Latina and African American people, I think he was trying to kind of have it both ways a little bit. He was referring to Hillary Clinton's immigration policy being radical, letting a lot of Mexicans in, and saying that they're going to take the jobs away from the Latino and black people that are already here. I don't know how well that will go over with Latino Americans, but it may work with black Americans who don't really identify with that group, low information voters. I'm just speculating. I have no idea because I don't think a lot of black people are going to be voting for Donald Trump, but it's interesting that that's his strategy.
And I think actually I wouldn't even call it interesting, it's troubling. If you're a Hillary Clinton supporter, he's talking like this, a more polished tone, a more scripted tone, frankly, a more serious tone. And you have WikiLeaks saying they're about to release a lot of information about the Clinton Foundation. You have the Guccifer hacker memos I've been covering. Some in the media are starting to pick it up that show direct collusion between the Democratic National Committee and her. It's like there's a new book every other day about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton.
The book Clinton Cash by Peter Schweitzer documents how Bill and Hillary used the State Department to enrich their family and at America's expense.
There was just news about Bill Clinton's additional extramarital affairs. I think, and I forgot, there's still a potential indictment hanging out there. Even if there is no indictment, there could be damning stuff that come out. The FBI, even if they don't indict her, they could be very harsh in their findings, which someone like Donald Trump is going to use. There was no scandal to go after Bernie Sanders with. I mean, if you have him going out like this every day, multiple times a week, polished, going after her on specifics, which Bernie frankly didn't do, you have him maybe getting a little more specific himself. But more importantly, him being complimented by all this drip, negative about Hillary. I mean, I personally don't think general election voters particularly care about Trump University. I don't think general election voters care about his businesses that went bankrupt because by and large, they see him, most of them, I'm not talking about whether he's racist or not, they see him as a successful businessman. And the media is trying very hard to go through the specifics, but at the end of the day, most people would think, okay, yeah, maybe he had a few failures, but I see his name everywhere around at hotels and all this, so they see him as successful. I do want to end that. The bottom line is, yes, this was more polished, yes, this was more scripted, but very much like a Hillary Clinton speech, there was zero substance in this speech. He did not describe how he's going to bring jobs back. He did not describe how he's going to get jobs. So I don't want to be too kind to Donald Trump. Like Hillary Clinton, there's no specifics. And if I was able to ask a question, which I thought this was a press conference, that's how the Trump campaign built it, I would have said, so with all these jobs coming back and all this fairness and taking on the establishment, how's that going to go hand in hand with the $1.3 million in tax breaks you'll be giving the 0.01% in the year one of your presidency? Tax analysis have studied his tax plan. He's giving over $1 million in breaks to not like the 1%, the top 1/10 of 1%. So I don't want to be too kind. There was no substance here. But again, because of our media who just covers the horse race, the lack of substance isn't highlighted. They're a pack of teenagers who are just excited for their first dance, and they're going to be jumping about the pivot and he's more polished and they're going to be digging into the behind the scenes, who wrote the speech and who's behind this, instead of what's actually happening in front of you. So I do think there wasn't any substance. We'll see. Maybe he'll come out with a policy paper or two. But the key thing for Donald Trump, if he wants a chance to win back a lot of the poll numbers that shrank, he needs to keep doing this and not relapse into Mexicans and Muslims and all this. But I think it was a good speech overall, and we will be covering more of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize that even though he wants to overthrow the establishment, his policies are diametrically opposed to Bernie Sanders. He wants to cut taxes for the rich. He wants to eliminate the estate tax. He wants to just decrease the revenue of our government so we couldn't have any of the policies that Bernie Sanders wants to implement. But I think my biggest takeaway from the speech is how pathetic the DNC is. I mean, they just propped up this candidate, Hillary Clinton, who is so vulnerable to these kinds of attacks, when a buffoon like Donald Trump, who's, yes, an opportunist, but he's still a buffoon, can really just easily take advantage of her. It's scary. We're in scary times, and that's my biggest takeaway from what we saw today.
YouTube.com/TYT Politics. I'm out.